It's hard to find enough superlatives to describe Saturday's action. Exhilarating, thrilling, end-to-end drama, a great advert for the game. It was one of those afternoons that really confirms your belief in the sport and makes you think the Ryder Cup really is one of sport's greatest competitions. So why would we discuss anything else on this podcast? Hello, welcome to Under the Abbey Stand. And despite my witty intro, we do have a 0-0 draw up at Prenton Park to discuss. But I'm pretty sure my first panellist, Matt Caspel, would rather we didn't. A nice golfing-themed pod this week, Matt.
We should talk about the golf.
Yeah, I'd happily talk about the golf.
Let's just do the golf. Let's just pretend that we know what we're talking about. A bit like we do with the football. We'll do the golf version of that. Yeah,
exactly. It is a lot more entertaining. I got home and watched the Ryder Cup highlights, and I was a lot more gripped by that than the 90 minutes of action that we paid a lot of money to go up to Tranmere and watch. But that's the cards that were dealt. And the other one on single Sunday, I've got Thomas Walker with me. That's another Ryder Cup reference, by the way, Walks. That's not me just having a dig.
You slagging him off. You slagging his personal life off. Single Sunday. Here's Tom Walker.
Not even said a word yet. Decent.
Well, mate, it was a game with Ironside, and you didn't miss an Ironside goal this time. So
yeah, that's good. Wow,
that's great, isn't it?
First minute of the pod. Bosh. You're getting it from both angles, Tom.
Bosh.
He's just.
I've got nothing. I've got nothing. Just come on, let's get.
Yeah, you had nothing in a very similar way to Neil Harris had nothing to offer yesterday. We may as well start talking about this game because I'm sensing that the vibes are fairly low in this room on a nice Sunday evening. Richard's asked us, what is the worst game you've ever seen featuring United? And I think that feels like a solid place to start. I asked you both to try and dredge up a miserable 0-0 from history that you remember or that stick out to you. And I'm hoping you've got something, Caspel.
Honestly, mate, no. Because
really?
Your message is hilarious. It's like, how can you help me remember some of the most forgettable 0-0, most boring? I'm like, well, surely by their very essence, that means you won't be able to remember them.
True.
Right?
But there's one that always sticks out into my head, and Tom, okay. I always mention it to you. So I can let Tom do it, but I wonder if he's got any. Have you got any others, Tom?
What you got, Tom?
I've got another one. So you go for the obvious one.
Well, my one is Lincoln away from. I couldn't tell you the year. What, 2012 or something? 0-0.
Was that the freezing cold?
It was like
when they put us down the front of the stand, and it was right. Like Easter time, and it was super windy, and it was like.
It cut through you.
Yeah. Okay, I do remember, but I just don't remember that being 0-0. But yeah, all right.
I remember that from my memory, there was like genuinely one shot in the second half, and I think it was Nathan Blissett from like 30 yards out. He had this pot shot that dribbled wide, and I remember that being genuinely like criminal game of football to take place and pay money for. But Walks, have you got a different one?
Yeah, I have actually. Managed to come up with it was actually Mark Bonner's first ever game in charge of us. Immediately
when he was caretaker.
No, well, he was caretaker, but it's actually after I think it was after Joe Dunn got sacked. We played Yeovil at home in December 2018.
I do remember that game,
which the BBC described managerless League Two strugglers Cambridge and Yeovil Town played out a poor rain-swept 0-0 draw at the Abbey Stadium.
That's great, isn't it?
That's great.
We drew 0-0 at Curzon Ashton, right?
Oh,
yeah, that was a zip.
And at home.
We drew at the Abbey as well.
Oh, yeah. There's 2 0-0s. There you go.
Good shout, Caspel. Yeah.
2 little 0-0s. We drew a Man United 0-0 as well, but that's really fit doesn't fit the brief.
I was thinking about the last 0-0 we had, and there must be one sooner than this. But the Pompey game that Sam Smith got sent off in, that was 0-0, wasn't it, at the Abbey around Christmas time? But that was quite a good 0-0 from my memory.
A great 0-0.
A great 0-0. Was there a 0-0 in the promotion year, last League Two promotion year? Sorry, that's putting you on the spot a bit.
Southend at home?
Yeah.
And Southend at home. Was Harrogate away 0-0?
Great.
That's
I'm pretty sure we drew Tranmere that year as well at the Abbey 0-0.
Yes, we did. We
drew 0-0 with Cardiff in 1998 when they had 8 men. That's a 0-0 you can stick in your slate. But that's probably quite a memorable 0-0 because imagine seeing that now. If they'd been down to 8 men yesterday and we'd still just done what we did, that would have been,
exactly.
Would have been quite incredible. So we were down to 10 men because of Kachunga. So
exactly. Thanks. Yeah, that's the running order. That's it. Yeah. Preview of the running order there. This is a 0-0 that I think is even more forgettable. It's so forgettable, isn't it? Like, I think even in like 2 months we'll be like, Tranmere away? Oh right, yeah, kind of. Owen's asked us, how on earth are you going to get a 30-minute pod out of that? Owen, my tactic was to talk about the Ryder Cup, but we'll see if that works. No, lads, general reaction from the game itself, obviously, as we've touched on, incredibly dull afternoon. Walker, do you want to go first? I'll ask it as a question. Do you think it's the most disappointing performance of the season so far?
The unenviable task of going first here.
Yeah, go on, mate. Yeah, arguably, I'll pick up the pieces.
Yeah, Cass was going to pretend his internet's dropped out in a minute, so just have to answer.
I was going to say, arguably going second is much harder because I'm probably going to sweep up the crumbs that we've got to work with here. Most disappointing this performance of the season, I think. Performance and result is one thing, but I think approach is probably the other thing. That probably, if you're asking where we're going to scrape together some content from, that's probably the main thing, I think. Quite interesting selection decisions, playing against really poor opposition, never really felt like we were really putting it on them, really had any intention of really kind of throwing a bit of caution to the wind and trying to go out and win the game. Even towards the end, I think some really poor individual performances in there. Never really looked like we were going to threaten too much, albeit never really looked like we were going to be threatened too much. But pretty uninspiring, I would say. There's not a great deal more to say than that. There's a lot of frustrations, but I think I turned to you about 3 or 4 minutes into the game, Julian. So this will be 0-0. 100%. Yeah. Just had the feeling that sort of afternoon.
He did, to be fair. I can verify that. And I'm on the not the top 20 chat room thing, and the Tranmere fan in there put after 5 minutes, he put this will be 0-0. So it was that sort of afternoon. Casper, Tom's picked out the approach separate to the performance and result, which I think is a really good thing to do. And we were just saying before we started recording that this is a weird pod because there's not a lot of I can't think of a single bit of the match to actually discuss in any detail. So it's a bit more just about our setup. But before we talk about that, what's your sort of reflection on it as a result and I guess as a performance?
Mate, first place to start. I've not watched it. How the fuck? They got 9 minutes and 15 seconds on the extended highlights. That's literally got to be 8 minutes of the players warming up, walking out, and then shaking hands at the end.
Yeah.
And then that's it, surely. Absolutely quite incredible. I think Tom summed it up quite well there, but I'll come from a different angle. I'll try and be positive because there are some positives to take, even though it doesn't feel that way. Tranmere obviously a pretty poor League Two football team, right? But they're restricted them to basically nothing. Like their XG is 0.08 or something from the entire game. Expected goal shots on target 0.06.
And open play XG was 0.04 or something. So it's just nothing
so
in open play.
They have not had a chance. We have faced a League Two opposition in an away game, which it's not as easy. It shouldn't be as easy as playing at home. And we have, through game plan, personnel, whatever it is, approach, all of the stuff that we can obviously talk fairly negatively about as well. The only positive thing I think you can say is we've come through that game. We've completely limited them to no opportunities. Theoretically, I was very theoretically, that is on paper a good away performance and result by the numbers, right? Literally, if ignore the eye test. Let's say you were just on a desert island, you didn't watch the game, and you just saw the result, you're like, it seems all right, doesn't it? Clean sheet, platform, away from home, all of that. Realistically, the feeling today is it's just frustration, isn't it? 'Cause it just feels like if we had put even, I think, a 5-minute spell of any kind of concerted pressure together and played even about 5% more attacking intent than we did, we cruised that. It's just knowing that we could and should have won that football match, completely in a straightforward fashion, in my opinion. And that's the frustration, I think, is in a season where when I think we get round to April, May, we probably are going to be in around it. I think the playoffs, are these going to be the moments that mean that you're going into, you go into April and you're 7 points off the playoffs instead of being 5 points in the playoffs because you've just failed to convert on what's in front of you. And I know we'll talk about it a bit more later, but I think the real frustration for me, it isn't even necessarily in how we started the game and set up. But I do think it was pretty negative. It's the failure to react during the game and just to see what's in front of you and, go by the eye test and go, hang about, this lot are rubbish. Let's be honest. Like Tranmere were rubbish. When we heard the guy do our fan preview, so we're always grateful for those. Thought, God, this guy sounds a little bit depressed. I think I'm starting to understand why now. Just because, wow, if that's it every week and that's their level, they also weren't really trying to win the football match. There's a real stalemate of two teams who didn't really look like they were trying to do anything.
It's a Tranmere side who, sorry, quickly, just to jump in on that, they've only won once at home this year, and that was opening day. Oh, sorry, the second week of the season against Shrewsbury, who are second bottom of the league.
Sure. I mean, that
says more about Shrewsbury than does Tranmere, though, I think.
The thing is, Tranmere have scored quite a few goals. Like, they're reasonably well-scoring team, if that makes sense. We've completely restricted them to nothing. So, like, if you're seeking out a positive,
sure.
I think it's about all you can do, to be honest.
But they also haven't won a game since the 23rd of August. So
no, I'm with you. No, mate, trust me, I'm with you. It was just I mean, there's a sort of separate point I think we'll get onto later about, and we've said it a lot on this pod, like we don't necessarily care about our style of play or how entertaining it is, as long as we're productive and we're getting the results. But I do wonder, and I know we got it later in the running order, like, is there a limit to that? Like, could it be? Is it allowed to be that boring and effective? I'm not so sure. So, I'm sure we'll get onto it later.
It's when it's so obvious that it's there for the taking in front of you and it feels like we're doing nothing. It's like we just hope that we'd find a way to score from a set piece or something, but not try and affect the game in any other way.
Even then, though, there was that we had quite a late long throw.
Oh yeah,
that's real uncertainty about like should the centre halves be going forward. And they were a bit stuck looking at Harris and like Jesus Christ, like try and win the game, like try and do something, please. Come on.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, look, let's start with this approach then, and how we set up, Tom. The vast majority of questions we got were a form of asking about our approach to the game, but also how we lined up. I think James, Allen and Luke all asked similar questions, and I think it was James's one which read, will a team picked on experience / perceived defensive resilience cost us in the long run? Both fullbacks were the wrong choices, and starting Catch at this point is just a bad decision, making it clear he's not good enough or has the fitness you want from his position. What did you make to the lineup?
Pretty interested. Yeah, I think I'd agree with the point of Kachunga. I think we've kind of done that one to death. Don't really need to go into it too much more. Saturday was very, very, very much more of the same. I think really with that. I think the thing that confused me is something that kind of comes off Tuesday night at Fulham as well, is a couple of more surprising decisions from Tuesday night. I'm thinking particularly starting Lavery, which presumably means he wasn't able to start on Saturday, and what is, I think to most people, a much more important football match, and one that arguably, if you get like 60 minutes out of Lavery there, you probably win the game based on quality more than anything else. But the more surprising one, I think, for me was just the fullbacks, which I can't quite wrap my head around really. I think like if you look at the right back, obviously Gibbons starts, but if you want to like really boil it down to like the simplest parts, I think we're basically at a situation where you look at it and you go, if you want to keep it tight defensively and you believe you're going to be up against it, Gibbons plays. And if it's basically the opposite and you believe that you need to be, asserting your dominance on a football match, then Liam Bennett plays. And Bennett comes off the back of a brilliant performance away at Fulham against Kevin, even, £35 million worth of talent. And he's kind of get a start at Tranmere, and that there are a couple of occasions, particularly second half, where the ball would get played on that right hand side, and with respect to seeing Gibbons run onto it, and you never quite feel with as much confidence that he's going to actually deliver something or actually be able to kind of conjure something up. Whereas with Liam Bennett, you give him a bit of time and space to run into, like you kind of feel like it's as good as having like a second winger on the pitch. Really, it's like a real outlet. So that was the first one. The left back thing baffles me. I can't get my head around Bradshaw. Not
even making the squad. Yeah.
There must be an explanation for it. Maybe he's picked up a knock. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. There's nothing on a football level like why he shouldn't start a game, because Purrington's been poor. I think, well, jury out at best, but poor, but probably most realistic. So you change the two fullbacks you played so well on Tuesday night to two who are just not delivering anything else that we need from them, particularly going forward. And yeah, I think centre mid is obviously another area of concern that we've spoken about on a couple of occasions. That kind of proved to be the case again. But yeah, I mean, like other than that, what you say, it was just a team that was picked with in mind as going and getting what we got, basically. And it felt like the game plan was pretty obvious. It was keep it tight, keep it compact, which obviously Caspel mentioned there is it is a positive. Like let's not kind of do it down. Always pleasing to keep a clean sheet and all that sort of stuff, but it felt like the game plan, the mentality was very, very risk averse, very safety first. Of let's try and get through to 70, 75 minutes whenever you get Lavery on the pitch, and then we'll see what happens, basically. And I think for the amount that we've spent and invested on some of these players in terms of wages, a lot of them we're paying money to that we won't have paid to players before, even accounting for the fact we're in League One for the last few years. Like you look at Ruddock, you look at Kachunga, you look at someone like Don Ball, for example. Like these guys aren't earning peanuts. This isn't the conference anymore. These guys are earning, 150, 200 grand a year salaries, more so perhaps in some instances. And I don't think it's good enough to go away to a team like Tranmere, who, again, with respect, all right, they've had, the odd good result and stuff, but they're going to be down there this season. It's not good enough to go there and just be quite kind of risk averse. And, if you're a manager like Neil Harris and maybe some people have got it in for you a little bit already, we feel, and are just waiting for things to go wrong in some respects, which I do still believe is probably the case from some quarters. This just adds fuel to the fire. It gives people something to talk about. The approach wasn't right. Individual performances were not up to scratch, but some of it is just what you expect. That's what happens when you have a lineup like that, I think.
I think we should just talk about this Harris thing now, actually, and just come onto it, because I think if the one thing you read out of that game and how he's approached it, both in terms of his lineup and how he's sort of reacted during the game, I mean, it's not a surprise, I guess, Caspel, but it does just tell you how Harris approaches these games. And it goes back to the point you just referenced a bit about boredom or like entertaining style. And it's like, it's the first game, correct me, keep me honest here if you two disagree. It's the first game where I've understood the opinions I've heard from Millwall and Gillingham fans in the past, specifically Gillingham fans, who the year he got sacked before he came to us, they were like 8th. I think
7th or so. Yeah, they were like around it.
Yeah, they were doing absolutely fine.
They were doing fine. Yeah,
fine, sure. Like they were not blowing it away. And I remember when we interviewed Harris on the pod, he said he felt like he was unfairly sacked. But Gillingham fans were like, had totally had enough of him. Millwall fans, by the end, even though they were like 10th in the championship, were like, I've had enough of him. I mean, I think there's a bit of the personality thing that, like, maybe after a few years, it can grate on you, right? As like the way he is as a person. But from a footballing perspective, it was kind of the first afternoon where I thought, oh wow, that is incredibly frustrating, because that, as Tom says, that was the game plan, right? Yesterday, that's what you wanted from it. First and foremost, don't concede a goal.
Yeah, I mean, we just had the handbrake on all day, right?
Yeah, do you exactly. Know what I mean? Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
just had the handbrake on. It was just like, just let him go. Just see what you can do. Do you know what I mean? Especially once Lavery come on, it's like, well, let's have a proper go at this. Like, let's actually see it, put it on him, and see what happens. I think at the end of the day, it's just down to numbers, right? As much as anything. Like, if we approach, I mean, as a spoiler alert, that is exactly how we're going to continue to approach a lot of these football matches for the rest of the season. And I think knowing that adds, I think, to the frustration, if that makes sense, or the disappointment you might feel. Is knowing that this is probably our lot for these away games is a bit sobering. I don't mind it. Like, the thing is, all of it, even the way we started, I understand. I mean, Tom made a really good point. We must have been yesterday at some point during the day, which is like, look, if he isn't starting Bennett and Bradshaw after Tuesday night, like after that performance, like what else is there left for Zach Bradshaw to do?
Yeah,
other than like silence Adama Traore, who's like a multi-million-pound Premiership and international football. Like, what else can you do? Like, how has he dropped out of that squad entirely? Unless, as you say, there's something else going on. It's the same for Bennett. Is like, what else can he do? He's literally just like silenced and nullified completely this £35 million signing that Fulham have made. It's like, well, that's it, right? That's just it. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing left for him. Like Harris, all the chat, over summer was about raising standards and, sorting this and that out and all of it. But like, I just can't get on board with the narrative if we're seeing like performances like that from Kachunga, for example. Like, it just doesn't flow logically for me. It's like, I don't understand how there's just a disconnect between some of the stuff that's being said and then some of the stuff we're actually seeing, I think. Same thing I said before. My biggest frustration was like, yes, it isn't even necessarily how we started. I do think there's a logic in all these away games in League Two to like, look, be in the game, have a clean sheet, give yourself something to go at, last 30 minutes. The problem yesterday or Saturday is we didn't do that part, right? We didn't do the go at them part. We just sort of, I guess, sat on our hands a bit and just said, like, yeah, no, fine. Good result. If you know what I mean. And that I think that will start to wear quite thin, because I'm just going to be left with the feeling that if we keep going like that in away games that are very presentable like that one, just feel like we're going to come up like, I say even as high as 12 or 15 points short of the number that I feel like we could have got. And I think, sure, maybe you lose one of these games, you go at a team, they pick you off and they score a counter-attacking goal. You're like, oh shit. And from what you're saying with this whole Harris narrative that some of our fan base has got, the knives will be out if that happens. But it's just like, from a net position, will we just end up with more points if we go and attack those games? For sure, it'll be more entertaining anyway. I just think you'll be more entertainment value and more productive in terms of points. So for me, it's like a no-brainer that we've got to go to any probably league game against bottom half of the table team, which just as a rough rule of thumb, we should be going there and trying to win. And literally anyone we go and play and we look that capable of winning the game, then we simply just have to go and try and win the game, in my opinion.
Do you think there's a weird thing here, and we were talking about this after the game, that like the way, because we know he's going to approach games like this. This is a fact of Neil Harris's whole career. This is how he approaches football matches. The best, for my money, I think the best I've seen us play is at Grimsby, Fulham Tuesday, and probably Charlton at home in the League Cup. There's something similar about those three games where it's not just the sort of mental side of being an underdog, but not having the ball for a lot of it and playing like, low block to soak up possession and scoring a goal on the break. Grimsby being basically until the 96th minute, the perfect sort of archetypal away performance from Harris. This is probably clutching at straws, Casper, but is there something to be said that actually it will suit us when we go to like more difficult places, because it will suit the way Harris wants to approach these games, and it might actually end up being more fruitful for us rather than the dynamic of a game where we need to unlock teams like yesterday, which obviously he doesn't seem to. I mean, he must know how to do it, but he doesn't seem like keen to really push it for 90 minutes.
I mean, I think, we said that in the preview for Grimsby game, right? It was like, actually, weirdly, this might be a very suitable style of away game for him, because there's less of an expectation of us actually going up there. We it might have been you and me in that preview. We were like, this has got to be our hardest game of the season so far. I do think that's good. I think the problem we got in League Two, I'm waiting to play a team and be impressed by them. And we've already played Swindon, who are like, right up there and competitive. And I thought they were okay. And I think the problem with that narrative you've got is I feel like we should almost, based on what I've seen so far, I feel like we should almost be going to any away game in this division and thinking that we could win the game. So is Neil Harris going to be good in League Two with a team that, thank God we're not like title favourites who haven't spent more money, because I think the weight of that, and this is what I imagine happened at Grimsby, so imagine their expectations were probably a bit higher than ours. And for sure, if we finish 10th this season and we're still in League Two next year and we're still with Harris, the expectation will be that we're going to compete for sure. I think the fan base will be expecting us to be competitive. And I'm just curious about whether this approach to any away game, to be honest, in League Two is going to be like long-term productive, if that makes sense. So,
yeah. See. You said Grimsby there, but I think you meant Gillingham, didn't you? And you're absolutely right. I think there was a weight of tight. They were expected to do more than I think we were from my memory, and they finished 17th in that first full season with him in charge, which is a bit of a red flag. Yeah. Walks. We talked about a couple of the fullbacks who didn't play. It really feels like the narrative of yesterday is not actually the players who played, but the ones who didn't. We've mentioned Bennett and Bradshaw. Something to be said for Job. Obviously, keep a clean sheet. So I guess, Watson, Morrison probably aren't at fault for what we're talking about here. But then centre mids is another area to discuss. We had what I thought was an interesting discussion on last week's review pod about centre mids. Have you got a sort of a take on Pelly's performance yesterday? Because there's a lot of chat about that, and specifically Jules, not me, asked what would it take to get the best out of Pelly, and through his career, what's the best way to describe his style of play? They also described us as very knowledgeable in the message, so I'd like you to give a very knowledgeable, no pressure on your answer.
You've got to break down Pelly's style of play from the last 10 years without having watched him play, except I think he played in a 7-0 when they absolutely thumped us. So
yeah, and in the cup game when they thumped us.
Yeah.
What a fucking hospital pass for a question.
Luckily, you're feeling very sharp today, aren't you? So I'm sure you're...
Come on. Let's have some of that knowledge, mate. Come on.
Centre mid's an issue. I was fairly defensive, I think, of Pelly Ruddock's contributions thus far.
You've been so defensive, mate. I'm ready for this.
I just think that there is a player in there who has to have a level of quality that's worth persevering with. I think is kind of the side of the fence that I land on. Was poor at Tranmere, and I think there's been a few instances in which he's played really well. I think Charlton, Colchester, Fulham contributed really well in those games. Obviously, in a lot of others, hasn't delivered what people would like from the player who was the big signing of the summer and touted, I guess, to be among the names of the best players in the league. And it hasn't turned out that way. It hasn't turned out that way yet. I do think there's a question of what is his sort of style of play, like what is his role within a team supposed to be. I guess there's two ways of looking at it. One is I'm not sure he's the sort of Houlihan-esque player who's going to really kind of win a game by themselves for you through like their creativity and sheer ability to just create a moment of magic. I guess the other way of looking at it is arguably if you're presumably the highest paid player we've got in the squad, you should be that player. And I think that's probably where a lot of people come from, and I think that's a legitimate viewpoint, and that's fair. It's kind of widening it out, I guess, a little bit to the central midfield thing. I think I'm kind of coming round to the idea that Ball and Ruddock might just never be an option that's going to work really well. I think you have two players there who look. I think Ball particularly his sort of first instinct or sort of real obvious role within the team is to be a bit of a destroyer. Is just to be a real kind of holding midfield player. I think we're probably getting to a point where we need to pick between one of them. I don't think Ball's covered himself in glory either. By the way, I think. Obviously, you look at Smith coming back, seems timely, I would say. And then you've got McLaughlin on the bench, who I'm not sure he quite fits into the same category as much as a Bradshaw, for example. But you look at him at Fulham on Tuesday, and you're thinking, well, in a sort of dysfunctional central midfield, if you can't get a game, then sort of when realistically are you likely to get your run in the side? I suppose the other argument is that particularly while we're short on numbers up front. Would it have been an option to drop Kachunga entirely, for example, and play a third centre mid? Maybe does that take a little bit of pressure off one of them in there and give us a bit of a different outlook, a bit of a different shape on things? Maybe it gives, if you can just basically give Ball a role in the team which is purely defensive and it's purely, you're going to sit and you're going to soak things up and you're just going to recycle the ball when you get it. Don't worry about things going forward too much. And then you've got two proper eights who can really get forward. They've got a bit more license to roam, sort of thing. Arguably, that is maybe a better option for players like McLaughlin, players like Pelly Ruddock, for example. And people might look at it and say that might look at it a little bit defensive. And I think on paper it might have done, against the Tranmere. But you're playing with 10 men with Kachunga, so there's no point anyway. Like for me, all you're doing is adding another option there. I don't know if that's something we're likely to do, but. Basically, if it's not 4-4-2 and you've got two actual strikers on the pitch, I think it's probably an option worth considering. But yeah, for sure, I think that's the area of the pitch where I feel like at least now we have like control of games to an extent. Like if you look at League One, we never had the quality to be able to do that. You felt like particularly in the middle of the park, we were constantly up against it, constantly chasing rather than really kind of having more of the ball or sort of having the basically having the better of the play in there. At least now I think we've got that, but what we're routinely struggling to do is really convert that into actual dominance and actual chances being created. And I think that's kind of the area of the pitch. If we can fix it, then the needle does move a little bit, but we are stuttering at best at the moment.
I think you make a good point about those games that Pelly's played particularly well in, being Colchester, Fulham and Charlton. I think in all three of those, he set up slightly further forward, from my memory at least. So like I do think there's something to be said for that, really. And I do think maybe when Smith's back, having like Ball and Smith next to each other, maybe Smith gives you a little bit more dynamism, and then Ruddock you can push a bit further forward to hopefully that quality that we think is in there for a guy who played in the Premier League like season before last, should show at some point. So hopefully, but he needs to put in he needs to start sort of playing up to that price tag, if you know what I mean, because there is a lot of chat around him. Let's chat about let's chat about McLaughlin, because Casper, would you on Saturday against Crawley, just looking ahead, would you make a change instantly to that midfield? Does it feel very Digby Cousins to you in there, and you'd want to just break it up as soon as, or if Smith's back potentially, but would you start McLaughlin in there and drop one of those two for Saturday?
I think I would change something. I don't think Harris will. To be clear, I think the viewpoint from Harris and I guess club will be that was a good away result, if you know what I mean. Coming off a home win before that, obviously ignore the Fulham game, is a bit of an outlier. So I don't think they're going to be minded to change it very much. I think we've probably seen enough evidence now to say like Ball and Pelly just doesn't work for whatever reason. It's not that it can't work at some stage, for sure. I just think right now it isn't as functional as it needs to be. And so naturally you have to change something. And I think I sort of agree with Tom's point. Like they have both come up quite short in different ways so far this season, I think. So something has to change, whether that's McLaughlin. I sort of like McLaughlin's energy, but I think the jury is definitely still out on McLaughlin and like how impactful he's actually going to be able to be as well, to be honest. I think it's reasonable to say he hasn't put in a good enough performance yet to earn the right to be in the side, if that makes sense. I'm going to keep banging the 5-3-2 drum, man. I'm obsessed with it at the moment.
Go on. How would you line up with a 5-3-2?
Well, so it just solves so many of the problems that I see that we have currently. And these problems are small, by the way. These are the problems of a team that has a 1.5 points per game average and sat just outside the playoffs. So if you want another positive, no one thinks we're playing very well yet. And we're still like in the top 10. And if we get it to click and he gets it to work, we'll be in the top 5. Do you know what I mean? So like there is enough to be positive about. 5-3-2 solves a lot of problems. Parrington gets binned because Bradshaw's more of an actual wing back. Bennett gets to play as an actual wing back, which is ideal. You don't have to have a Jobe, Morrison, Watts headache because they all get to play football. You only need one holding midfielder, which is also good. And you get 2 up top. So it's like, it is such a no-brainer for me currently because it solves for me almost all of the problems that I think that we have in terms of shape, structure, not being able to get 2 strikers on the pitch at the same time, personnel issues. I don't think he's going to do it. But this for me is a sort of logical solution because I just think what they're doing with Pelly at the moment, like Pelly did play high and he played particularly high against Fulham. He was like up in like the 9.5 position at half the time, if that makes sense. And to be fair to Pelly, he put in a hell of a shift and he played really well in that game. I've sort of made a point of mentioning it to you guys because I've obviously been a bit critical. I think they feel compelled to play both of them because they're senior pros and, you know, they've both played top flight football with different guys and they've both played for pretty big clubs and obviously on big money as well. And that compulsion to have them both on the pitch, but knowing that they shouldn't be playing side by side has sort of forced us to push Pelly high up the pitch. I don't think it's really his natural place, if that makes sense. I think he naturally would want him deeper lying, but I think they've felt like this is the only way to sort of disrupt it and solve it without having to drop one of our like 2 most senior pros along with like Morrison, I guess. But again, I think this is a compromise from what Harris said in pre-season about, you know, standards and stuff. I think this is a bit hypocritical to continue playing players who are underperforming. Is like, well, what standards? Like And if you're on the bench and you're McLaughlin, who, was like a captain of a League Two promotion team, right? He's got to be thinking, well, how do I, this isn't a meritocracy here. Like, how do I get in this team if he's just always going to default back to this? And my concern is, if this goes on a bit longer, then maybe you start to, do you start to lose people a bit mentally in that squad? Is there a bit of a like, well, fuck this, I'm not going to get a start, like, not down tools, but it's like these guys want to be playing football because it's what they're paid to do. Some of them are still fairly early in their career or early enough that, they can't afford to just like to pack it in. They've actually got to, they've got to feed their families and earn their way, and they've got careers to think about in a way that, to be honest, certainly Pelly and maybe Don Ball slightly less so, because they're probably reasonably well set up from the career they've had so far, which is good for them. So I think when we talk about standards, it's like, look, I want to see both Ball and Pelly playing better than they are if they want to retain their place in the side, or I want to see more pressure. So yeah, I think Tom's point about Corey Smith, or maybe you said actually, it's ideal that he's coming back now. And he also played really well against Fulham, because of all the departments where we need a bit of like rotation and pressure on the squad right now, I think it is that centre mid department. I want them to be concerned that they could lose their place in the team, because at the moment they both look way too comfy, like knowing they're going to be starting these football matches. And if Harris wants to set high standards, he wants to push us to be a playoff or a promotion team, no one should think they've got an automatic right to start any football match. And you want to see them training their bollocks off because they've got to earn their place. But if someone goes to a cup game and puts in like a legitimate 10 out of 10 performance, which 4 or 5 blokes did, they should keep their shirt, in my opinion. It's as simple as that. So
I think that's such a good point. Sorry to interrupt, but I also was going to add to it that it must be demoralising for Liam Bennett. Obviously, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know how this is explained. We don't know if Tuesday night took it out of Job and Bennett and Bradshaw in a way that meant they couldn't play. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument at least, that they can and like could have played on Saturday. It must be demoralising for them. And the other name we haven't mentioned here is Ben Knight. And the point of, and I've been critical of Ben Knight this season. I think he's still adapting to playing, proper men's football, and he actually hasn't played a lot of football in his career so far, despite obviously having clearly a lot of talent. But if you look at Kachunga yesterday, for example, we both tried to find this. So he had 12 touches in 57 minutes, not a single one in the opposition box. And we had the majority of possession yesterday. And that's a guy playing like this 9.5, dropping off the striker role. So he should be involved in a lot going forward, you'd think, right? Like maybe a striker who's like a finisher. You always see the stats with like Haaland, who has like 10 touches, but like 2 of them are goals.
Scores like 40 goals
exactly.
a season, mate. Yeah.
It's a bit different, crucial. I think, in the roles Kachunga's playing, because he's playing off a striker. And I think Ben Knight is sat on the bench thinking, well, it feels like a game that could be set up for him, though. Someone to like unlock a defence and play a splitting pass to split the lines and all that sort of stuff. And I think we had this question in, Tom, maybe we get your take on it. The artist asked, is Harris an overthinker? I actually think he's an underthinker. I think he's just got his I think he's got his blokes, and he's just like, they're playing, so I'm not going to think about it anymore than that.
That's brutal. Oh my God.
I don't mean he's not smart. I just mean that's how he approaches it. I think he just thinks Purrington, Ball, Pelly, they're all going to play. Doesn't matter. They're just going to play.
Please say that to his face if you next time you see him. I really want to see how he reacts.
I mean,
he was my favourite WWE wrestler as well.
What,
the Underthinker. That's great.
That's great.
Judging how he judging how he treated Cabia in the tunnel after the Grimsby game, I'm not sure I will tell him to his face. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? It just feels like it's that same discussion that he's got his blokes and he's gonna start them. There's kind of no debate about that, and he's not. There's some other slots that are maybe up for grabs, but not the left back role, not Don Ball's role, not Pelly's place in the side.
Not yet, but I mean, push will come to shove, and he'll have to change something
surely
at some point, because at the moment, in the context of like how we performed this season, which I don't think at any point really has been that good. I think we've been okay, we're fine, but as Casper mentioned, we're still in amongst it really. But there will come a time when we are going to need to change things, and we are going to need to start looking at games and thinking, well, actually, a point is maybe not as much use to us as, or drawing a couple of games in a row is not as useful to us as chucking a bit of caution to win, maybe winning one and losing one because of it, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean something I think will and probably should change in our approach to these games. I think like you'll probably see next Saturday against Crawley, I think it is. I think then you will see us line up in a way and probably have an approach which is a little bit more attacking, because it's a home game against a team who are not great, or certainly not any great shakes. You're expected to win the game, so naturally you'll see that. But I just think it's these games, it's your Tranmere away, it's instances like this where I'm not sure he's overthinking it. I think probably there's a halfway ground between being an overthinker and an underthinker, and
just thinking.
Yeah, he's a thinker.
Just contemplating. Contemplating. I think like basically it comes down to like what does he value and what does he think most about, I suppose. And I just think that I don't think at any point the primary intention was to win that football match at Tranmere. The primary intention was not to lose it. So in a sense, we kind of got exactly what we went for. And all right, I know in his presser he mentioned a couple of things about maybe being a little bit disappointed with how we played going forward. But I don't think he'll care that much. I think he's thinking a lot more and he's valuing a lot more the other bit, the fact that it was Tranmere nil. I think that's the bit that's probably going to be pleasing to him. And I think he'll be more pleased with that on a consistent basis than he would if we lose one at Tranmere 1-0, then go the next week and win one and stuff. And even though, like Castle mentioned it a little while ago about as a net result, you're probably better. Well, you are better off winning one and losing one. You are drawing two, but it just feels like a bit of consistency, I guess. And maybe he's not wrong to do that either. Like I think we were pretty negative because we spent a lot of time and energy going to the Wirral to watch it, and it was poor, and it was a poor watch. It was a really difficult watch. But arguably, like, we have enough quality. Maybe it'll click at some point, and when it does, like, we're already not that far away. So, yeah, I guess we have to see.
That just feels so passive, though. The problem is these away performances, point, fine, clean sheet, awesome. Like, never complain a clean sheet in any game, but definitely away from home. That's like a really good result in strictly that sense. They simply have to be orbited with like convincing home wins against this fucking gubbins that we played so far. I think we got the easiest fucking fixture list of anyone so far. I know you've got some in this running order. We've had an insanely easy trot of games based on the teams that we're particularly at home, and we are still yet to have convincingly won any of these home matches. So like, I'll drink the Kool-Aid on these boring away draws if we put Crawley away 4-0 and it's attacking and open-minded and, maybe even CUFC and Lavery start, I'm like, wicked. All right, we're going to win our homers. We're going to draw our aways. I can literally at that point, I'll be like, do you know what? If we draw all our remaining away games 0-0, the most boring away season of all time, but we're going to win enough home games, we're going to get the playoffs, and it's going to be entertaining, and there's going to be, a reason to turn up in December, January, it's fucking freezing. All of that I would be absolutely on board with. That's fine. I'm just so unconvinced. We all know how that Crawley game goes. It's going to be fucking agony again, if you know what I mean.
Until Ryan Loft scores.
Just until Lofty bags. But you know what I mean? It's just going to be, it's just going to be pain again. Like, just like rolling shit up a hill, painful to watch. You'll be looking at the time on that clock, thinking about your half. Honestly, like, you will be looking at that. I guarantee you, all three of us will be doing this. We're looking at that clock, thinking, oh, halftime pint soon, and it will have 12 fucking minutes on the board, and you'll be like, oh.
Does that say more about us than the game, though?
Just honestly, I'm telling you. And
Casper, I'm not being funny, mate. That, like, irrespective of performance and setup and approach and stuff, that is prone to happen.
That does happen to you. That does seem to happen to you quite a lot.
We could be 3-0 up, and I think we might.
Castle, you got to remember there was an occasion where we left the game, England Albania at Wembley on a Friday night after 6 minutes.
I had to force you to stay.
We won that game 5-0. Yeah, we approached it very attackingly. So yeah, point proven.
But you know exactly what I mean. My point is totally. Is that if Crawley is yet another sort of insipid, very hard to digest, stumbling, stuttering sort of, maybe we win the game 1-0, but it's like, it's just like, oh my God, the league table's going to look fine. And we'll be unbeaten on a run of unbeaten games with also just a really good cup performance against Fulham in this. They'll be like, we'll have to come on this review pod. We're like, oh yeah, but it's another home win and it's great and we're sixth now and blah, blah, blah. You're like, Jesus Christ. Though, like, is it going to be good at any point? Like, what's the point? In a way, I'm almost on a 360 on the narrative from the start of the season, which is like, maybe I do want to be slightly entertained. Like, I just don't want to be, it just shouldn't be this hard. You know what I mean? Like the whole getting relegated to League Two was like, oh, well, we'll win some games and it'll be entertaining, you know. That home crowd last time was just over 5,000. We took more people to foot. I know Fulham's had an impact on that, but when it gets cold, wet, dark, November, December, if that's the level of performance and we're sort of somewhere between 10th and 15th in the league, we're going to be seeing low 4,000 attendances, if you know what I mean. And that has to be a concern because suddenly you're like, well, maybe the entertainment value is important. You know, maybe it is quite a big feature because if people are not seeing goals or being entertained in any way, it's like, you know,
yes, I do.
To latch onto.
And I think it's because, and it's particular to this league again, which is maybe comes back to the point about maybe Harris's style not being suitable to this division. So we know for a fact that this division is quite inherently random at points, right? That much more so than the rest of the EFL. That stat that Tunbridge mentioned in the interview we did, like, is the one that sticks in my mind. Was it 76% in League One in terms of your budget to where you actually finish, 25% in League Two. So it goes down a lot, and it just indicates like kind of how random this division is. And at halftime of the Fleetwood home game, me, Tom, and a few friends of the pod were standing around, and it was 0-0 at halftime, and we were like, God, a bit boring, isn't it? But like, we sort of had this discussion on this passive thing, Casper, about like, well, you know, there is an argument that like, if you're just knocking around until about February, March, around the playoffs, that's kind of okay. So like, you don't need to be that good to do that. But I think the problem is, to your point, Casper, is that like, that's okay. But because of this randomness in League Two, you can't rely on winning those home games consistently, I think, in the way that you maybe can in other divisions if you approach it like that. So then if you're lacking the entertainment and you're lacking the consistency to be able to get the results with no entertainment, the narrative's it can so quickly turn on Harris and his approach, right, in that respect. So it's like, I said to you yesterday when we were coming out of the station, I think on the way there, and you were like, God, I'm really hating how passive we're feeling about this, like as a pod, because it is easy to think about the rest of this pod. There'll be people listening to this podcast that will be thinking like, you boys are going nowhere near hard enough on Pelly and Don Ball. We've had this accusation already a few times.
Chunga's escaped. I don't know how he's got out of this so far.
Yeah, you know he has. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we did mention he's had no touches in the opposition box. I feel like we've gone in pretty hard on Kachunga at various other points. But I don't know, I think it's an interesting point on the passive thing, because it's like, are we then just not demanding enough from a squad that is clearly like good for this level, right? That's the other thing. You're looking at players like Kai Mayer and Lavery as a front three going, God, that's surely Don Ball and Pelly Ruddock. It's got to be one of the best centre midfielder pairings on paper in the division. So like, then there is a point where maybe we should change our own standards, despite all predicting us to finish mid-table. I don't know, I'm going around in circles a little bit here, but
maybe you're underthinking.
I'll tell you what else made me laugh yesterday is his in his post-match when Harris goes,
so good.
When Harris goes, I'd love to be able to refund you for that. You can,
yeah.
Feel free. You can.
Bloody love to, mate.
Love to, but I can't.
Sorry,
can't,
though.
Yeah.
I wish I could.
He's talking to camera a bit at the start of the presser.
It's amazing.
It's so Brent.
It's so Brent. It's so Brent. You can see how that's going to wear so thin though when we're like 14th, drawn 0-0 at Accrington in February or something. Like, oh my God. Look, that's 10 games in yesterday. So let's bring this discussion back to like a wider thing. I think 10 games in, universally known as like the first time you can look at the league table with any sort of seriousness. We are 10th, 2 points outside the playoffs on 15 points. We scored 11, conceded 9. That's the fourth least in the division. It's worth saying. I'm sure that's what Harris would say. But as you said, Caspel, 6 of those games were against bottom half sides, including bottom and 22nd at home in Cheltenham and Newport. Cheltenham, by the way, got absolutely... Did you see what Grimsby did to them yesterday? I know they were down to 9, but they got absolutely walloped. We've also got 21st at home next in Crawley, and then 23rd away the week after. So our start, by 12 games in, will have played 8 of the bottom half and 4 of the top half. Tom, what's your reflection on the start of the season? I guess trying to sum up all this thing with performances, results, but then also taking into account the fact that now we can look at this league table and go, we have had a pretty kind start to the season fixture list wise.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it even before the start of the season. I think I can't remember what it was, but like I think a run of home games is all teams that were like, I don't know, very unfancied basically, particularly at home. And I think there's only maybe a couple, I think, MK, maybe Notts away, where we're playing away at teams sort of this side of Christmas, where you're like, probably they're going to be up and around it. So yeah, I think this sort of slightly kinder start probably carries on for a little while, to be fair. I think the actual results of it all are probably a little bit kinder than what the eye test has been. Just in the sense that I don't think there's really been an occasion where we've really stamped down the dominance that we feel like we should have on most of the teams that we played so far and converted into something like genuinely impressive. Like, you know, constantly making caveats like, look back to the first day of the season at Cheltenham, it's like, all right, pretty poor, but, you know, other teams lost first day of the season, but it's 3 points, but clean sheet. Same against Newport, really, again, like a pretty uninspiring afternoon, but 2-0 win, comfortable, you take it all day long sort of thing. Harrogate, you know, you drop points, arguably the first half is the best we've played all season, so that's good, that's a positive that's come from it. So, you know, we've never really looked that good, but I do think it just underpins everything about League Two, and like, you know, we'll keep repeating it, we'll keep repeating it, but you don't have to be that good in League Two, and that's in a sense, it's the encouraging thing, because like you can see that there's an opportunity there. That if we do improve things and performances do get better, there is a chance that we, you know, move up the table and become a contender quite quickly. But the flip side of it is like, just can't really see where that's going to come from, really, because if the opposition gets tougher and, you know, performances stay the same, then naturally results start to decline, I guess. So yeah, start of the season's been, I think, to be honest, pretty much what I expected. I think we've not looked amazing. We've done pretty well out of games you expect us to do pretty well out of. We've maybe come unstuck a little bit in games that are on paper a little bit more difficult, like Swindon away, like Bristol Rovers away, for example. And that's probably the more damning stat, really, is the fact that, and I guess what sums up any mid-table team is that often they beat the teams that they're worse than, or beat the teams that they're expected to be better than, and lose all the games against teams that they're expected not to be as good as. And what we've maybe struggled to do is to bridge that gap and be like, okay, we look all right, we look pretty comfortable in games that you'd expect us to, but when push comes to shove, can you really move the dial and, you know, turn a 0 into a 1 or a 1 into a 3 against a team maybe you might not expect you have a God-given right to do so against. Tranmere is probably a good example of it, really good example of it. Fine, comfortable, okay, but not a lot more. That's why we're 10th rather than 2nd, for example. And that's, in my heart of hearts, I think that's probably the way it will continue, to be honest, but let's see.
What about you, Casper? Has it surprised you at all at the start of the season, or has it been what you expected?
Well, I guess I predicted 14th in our pre-season pod. I also predicted as my hot take that we would score the least, but also concede the least. And it isn't quite happening like that, obviously, but it's not we're not a million miles away from that, are we? No. I thought we would be low. I thought it would be pretty attritional. I thought we would be hard to break down, hard to beat. And look, all of that, and again, same from Tranmere, you have to give a huge amount of credit. Is something to be said for being, you know, disciplined, well-structured. You know, we're bottom of the XG conceded table, right? Like, as in we give away the least chances to teams. But we're also 16th in the actual XG table. So kind of that tells you the story, right? That's going to net you out to sort of a very drab mid-table setting, which is what I think we're in. I think the fixtures have been on the kinder side. We see that. We've played so many of the teams down near the bottom of the league. And to be honest, like, having played Cheltenham, complete no-hoper. Like, even Newport were pretty hapless. I would actually put Tranmere probably on that list as well, of like teams that you feel, having played them, you feel very confident they're going to finish in the bottom 6 in the division, if that makes sense. It's as simple as this. We need this statement at home win. We need something to start happening a little bit more, I think, if we want to be a playoff contender. If not, based on what I've seen so far, I think my prediction 14th and being very low scoring and being very low conceding, I think it's all spot on. I feel pretty rock steady on it, because if we play like that, we're gonna have quite a lot of frustrating afternoons, I think, when we come up against, you know, your Notts, your MKs. Swindon obviously was somewhat frustrating, at least an entertaining football game. But a frustrating outcome for us there, basically. So yeah, to be honest, like, it's probably been like, what, a 5 out of 10. Tom's right. Everything comes with a caveat. Obviously, our favourite caveat of the season is that Pelly did not have a full preseason. Okay, and I was going to keep reminding you that in April, when Pelly's still huffing and puffing and getting 90 minutes. But he didn't have a full preseason. Okay, it's just become my like obsession. This is to say that at every opportunity, basically. So, no, mate, it's been fine, isn't it? You've got to hope that this is just like at some point we light the blue touch paper and it pops off. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got to hope. Even if we get to January and we're in this position, it's been a bit boring, but we're 10th, 9th, hovering outside the playoffs. And they might do one or two bits of business because there's a belief that, you know, we're a good striker away from being a sort of top 7 challenger, and we go and sign someone and suddenly, you know, we start scoring a goal and a half a game. You'd be like, oh, fine. Actually, in a way, if you express the season like an away game, that's a bit like hanging into half the season and then accelerating in the second half. You know, would you rather look a bit shit and boring in August and September or March and April? So if we're going to drink the Kool-Aid, then hopefully there's a bit of a plan to reinforce attacking options, definitely. And is that sort of inspires us to, we don't need to improve a lot, right? We just need to improve a little bit in the second half of the season. So there's enough to latch onto, I think. But you know, if we draw 0-0 against Crawley, then let's come back and see how everyone's feeling about the starts of the season then, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. Everything will feel a bit different in that scenario, won't it? I feel like that's a good place to stop. Tom, last word, though, for you. How good was it to see Big Joe again yesterday?
Yeah, great. Yeah, good.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
At least he didn't miss one of his goals, eh?
Yeah, I suppose.
There you go. Were you relieved that we didn't sign Big Joe based on what you saw, Tom? That's maybe because I felt like that.
Not like very relieved that we're not sat here talking about having signed Ironside to like a 3-year contract.
The 3-year deal's the thing, isn't it? I think with him at Tranmere. I mean, he seemed like the only sort of tiny bit of quality that they had going forward, really, or at least like playing up to their game plan. Do you know what I mean? Like he was winning a lot of little flick-ons. I mean, it's hard to. How can we talk about like that game and any sort of like quality individual performances in it? I mean, we all watched it. It wasn't
particularly from a Tranmere forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not AXG, but yeah, good to see him. Glad he's doing well. Probably says a lot that he got a much better reception than a few.
Yeah. He doesn't suit the short hair so much, I don't think. I think
it looks too. Again, have to count the greatest of respect. It looks a bit too tidy. Like Ironside that I remember, bandaged up, bruised, headbands on, all that sort of stuff. Smashed phone case, rocks up with like a JD Sports drawstring bag, slush puppy in one hand, fairy cake in the other. That sort of centre forward. But yeah, glad to see him doing well. Glad to see that his.
Is he doing well?
Yeah.
Well, he's got a 3-year deal. Can't be done.
That's good. To be fair, he's done well there. Yeah,
he's been rewarded with that. 3 years in Birkenhead, mate.
3 years in Birkenhead, mate. Yeah.
Is it a blessing or a curse? All right, let's sack it off. Let's go and watch some. There's some Ryder Cup to watch, which will hopefully be a bit more entertaining. Casper, it's a pleasure.
That's it, mate.
Walker, always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, golf, man.